everyone, I'm Kristen Hawkins. Welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. Today, I have a very special guest and a good friend, Richard Harris. Richard Harris is the Executive Director of the Truth and Liberty Coalition. He also serves as the General Counsel of the Andrew Wommack Ministries at Ancharis Bible College. And you're also a pastor here in Woodland Park, Colorado, right?
That's right.
Which is where we're at. We have beautiful Pikes Peak behind us today.
Amen.
So, Richard, you are in this special mini-series that we're doing, Explicitly Pro-Life, on pro-life economics. And I've been kind of figuring out who we need to talk to, have varying, views, differing opinions, different viewpoints about socialism, about socialist policies, because I think this is something we don't ever really hear about in the pro-life movement. We hear kind of the conservative talking points of socialism bad, but we also, as pro-lifers, we want to take care of moms and babies, and we don't want any woman to ever feel like she has to choose between her education or her career and the life of her child. Because we actually, as pro-lifers, we say, you can do both. It's going to be hard, but you can do both, and we're here to support you. And I think that's sometimes how we fall into like supporting maybe some government policies, some things that might sound good when the politician says it, but then at the end of the day, it's actually going to hurt more families and the future of our country and result in more abortions and more lives being lost. Right. So you have some great experience. You have your JD from Cornell, so you're a lawyer. You practice in conservative politics in Oklahoma. You're involved there in the Oklahoma conservative movement. Now you're a pastor, so you kind of have like the full gamut of expertise for us. So thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks for agreeing to do this. But I know I sent you a list of really hard questions that we have to get through in just a short amount of time. But God will tell you what we need, what people need to hear today.
Right.
So the first question I wanted to start off with, which is a very basic question, is what is socialism? Where did this concept of socialism come from?
Right. Well, socialism, a good question. You did give me some really hard questions, so I hope I do okay today. Part of it is for me too, because I need these answers too. So well, they are really good questions, and they're deep questions, really. Socialism is, people think that it's kind of a modern thing. The truth is that socialism goes all the way back to the beginning of the history of mankind. And you read in the Bible, one of the first things that happened after the population of the earth began to increase was the Tower of Babel. And a guy named Nimrod, who became a king, and he brought everybody together and essentially made them slaves to build a tower for communal benefit. And God looked at the situation and said, this is not good, because whatever is entered into the heart of man to do, he's able to do now. And he scattered us, created nations and different languages. Socialism is basically, it is, well, I'm just going to lay this out here and say it. It's
explicitly pro-life, so you can say whatever you want.
Okay, well, socialism is an unbiblical and ungodly philosophy from its foundation through and through. Now, people might disagree with me on this, but in my opinion, there is no wiggle room for compromise on socialism, because it once you understand what it is, and recognize how ungodly it is, you'll see what I'm saying. So the Bible, socialism, people think, oh, it's good because it's a middle ground between republicanism, now don't say democracy, okay, but republicanism and communism. And the truth is that it's really just communism redressed, and you might say communism light, okay, because both communism and socialism operate from a materialistic worldview, a secularistic worldview where God is not in the equation, all right, because it believes that it believes that in society today that wealth is attributable to systemic injustice, all right, to oppression and that everybody can be put into two categories. One is the oppressors, and two is the oppressed.
Yep.
And that the oppressors are wealthy because of the systemic injustice. And so it's the job of government, according to socialists, it doesn't matter what level or degree, they all believe this ultimately, is that it's the job of the government to come in and redress that systemic injustice by redistributing wealth and controlling what happens in the economy.
I mean, that's what Kamala Harris said, now the vice president, during the election. She was saying equality of outcomes.
Correct.
Not equality of opportunity.
Right.
And I don't think anyone really paid attention to this. We would need to ensure equality of outcomes.
Yeah, and there's a radical difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity. Equality of outcome means the government, by force, will come in through the inherent force power, of the police state and redistribute wealth in order to assure equal outcomes regardless of personal choice, right? So it's always regardless of personal choice. Wow. This is the way it would be if everything were fair. Right. These would be the outcome. Whereas equality of opportunity simply says, it recognizes everybody comes into the world with a different set of circumstances, both innate and external, right? So one person might be born with mathematical ability and inherent, another one with musical ability, another one with sports ability or whatever. And some might be born into wealthy families, some into poor families. But what matters in the Christian biblical worldview is what you do with what you've been given. And our society it's not hard to find examples of people that came into very difficult circumstances. I mean, I could give you my own story. I was born seventh of 9 kids. Both of my parents were alcoholics. My mother was 100% disabled. She only had sight in one eye, and that eye's vision was poor. And so we lived in really severe poverty. We all of us kids threw newspapers from the age of 8 years old just to put food on the table and pay the electric bill. And I could go into a lot of detail. It was rough, let me tell you. But because of the values that were instilled in me, and because of the Christian influence in my life, and other factors, I had developed certain habits and convictions, and I worked hard, and I applied myself in school, and I did well in school. I wasn't a great athlete or anything like that, but I did well in school, went to law school, got a scholarship at Cornell University, went to Cornell Law School, and now, I'm doing pretty well. And so you can overcome in this life, right? You can overcome, regardless of how severe your circumstances are. I like to look at Clarence Thomas on the United States Supreme Court. He's born into abject poverty in the Deep South. He was black, and according to liberal socialist philosophy, he had no chance. But he didn't view it that way, and he took advantage of his opportunities, learned, applied himself, and so on. And now look, he sits on the highest court in the land. So the difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity is the Christian worldview says the purpose of the law is not to assure equal outcomes because everybody makes their own choices in life. But the purpose of the law is to assure that the law is applied without partiality to all people, regardless of race, color, anything else. That way, everyone has the same opportunity under the law to take advantage of the circumstances and God's grace in their life.
Wow. That's a lot.
That's a lot. I know.
That's a lot. That's pretty much the end of the podcast because I think just thinking about what you were saying there, but we hear a lot, especially today with younger evangelicals, gosh, I don't want to be mean, but reading Christianity Today or some of these online magazines, where it's almost like they're advocating for socialism. If they're not fully saying it, it's pretty much out there in the rhetoric that they're using. And a lot of it's about justice and fairness. What do we say? I think a lot of folks, they fall into this because of what I said earlier we do want to take care of our fellow human beings. That's, as pro-lifers, we believe every human being has value.
Right.
And we should treat human beings with dignity and respect. So what are some of the ways, you're obviously a very politically conservative individual. You can look at your bio and you see and some of the events I've spoken at with you, alongside you at in the past. But I think sometimes conservatives as a whole, political conservatives, get a very bad rap of not really caring about the individual, or only caring about the person generating wealth and making money. What do you say to a young person who says, well, I'm a liberal, I'm a socialist, I'm a progressive, whatever label, there's a bunch of labels, because I'm a Christian?
To claim to be a socialist because you're a Christian is a contradiction in terms. Because socialism you may feel like you're being compassionate, but it's not compassionate to take money that doesn't belong to you and give it to someone else, okay? This is not it's false compassion. If you want to help somebody, give your own money, but don't take the money of someone else. That's not true charity. It's not true love. It's actually coercion and a form of slavery, to be honest with you, where you are enslaving another person for your own purposes.
So your money, your choice. If you want to give your money away,
that's right.
Go for it.
That's
right. I was thinking of like,
well, and that might seem callous, but the truth of the matter is that the care for the poor and the less the orphans, the single mothers, and all this kind of thing. These things, it's not a purpose of government. So God ordained government, right? And God ordained the church, and God ordained the family. These three institutions are biblical, and you can trace them all back all the way to Genesis. The purpose of government, we know, according to Romans 13 and according to 1 Peter chapter 4, is to restrain evil. It is not to redistribute wealth. It is to be a check on evil. That goes all the way back to Genesis 6, where God gave a command to Noah after the flood. If man sheds blood, then his blood shall be shed. All right? This is the first institution of civil government.
That's a profound statement.
Yeah.
The purpose of government is to restrain evil.
It is to restrain. Our founding fathers in America said it a different way, but it's the same principle. In the Declaration of Independence, they said that for this purpose, governments are instituted among men. What purpose? We'll go right above there, and it says, to secure these liberties. To secure these liberties, governments are instituted among men. To secure our God-given, unalienable rights is the purpose of government. So I teach this in the Practical Government School at Charis Bible College, is that what is an unalienable right? Okay, and what is a crime? What are those two things? Well, they're opposite sides of the same coin. When a person infringes on another person's rights, that's a crime. Okay, so the right to be free from an infringement by another person. So this is the purpose of government, is to be the line drawer in that process, and to say, if you cross this line, then you will suffer this consequence. And so in that sense, the government is instituted by God to establish order and to defend rights, to punish evil, restrain evil, that kind of thing. It is not instituted to care for the poor or support the weak and all these kinds of things that people think today. That function is given to the family and to the church. Throughout Scripture, there are approximately 230 references to caring for the poor, and not a single one of those goes to the government. They all go to the family and the church.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you think about that today, you think about what's been going on the past year with the COVID pandemic and the restraints that have been imposed upon churches, when they can gather, how many can gather. You think about, oh my gosh, the Biden administration and their obvious attacks on any person of faith. Right. Christian universities, Christian hospitals, Christian employers having to, provide for abortifacient contraception or other abortions in their employee health care plans and things like that. Do you see this as a major challenge that we have? And do you think that's a purpose and that's a goal of what you see progressives, liberals doing in Washington, D.C., is to trying to, at the best of their ability, to kind of squash the power of the church, of the family, so then people will look to the government for help that they need?
Yeah, there's no question about that. It's absolutely true. Now, the question is, to what degree are they aware of it?
Yeah.
Are they that aware?
It's not very overt.
Well, it's more overt now than we ever could have dreamed even 10, 15 years ago. The leaders in the socialist progressive movement in America are not bashful anymore about calling out Christians as the enemy, because they realize that the policies that result from the Christian message and the gospel and the Christian worldview are at odds with their agenda. And that's because, and this is why I said at the beginning today, Christian, that socialism is 100% unbiblical. The philosophy of the left and of socialism, number one, it's a materialistic philosophy. Do I mean they're like greedy kind of people? You know, they're hoarding gold. Yes, but not really. What I mean is that they exclude God. They are secularistic in their viewpoint and in their philosophy. Okay, and so because they exclude God, then the material world is all there is. All right, there is no transcendent purpose for human beings. Now this is huge. This is fundamental to the pro-life movement.
That's a pretty big difference.
Because God is not in the picture, because there's no transcendent purpose to human life, then all that matters is my own material, not necessarily just money, but that's pretty fundamental. My material prosperity, my external prosperity is all that matters. And what is morality to someone who has no transcendent purpose? Morality is simply whatever advances what feels good and seems right to me, okay? And so the external, manipulating the external, controlling the external, this is what socialism is. It's what liberal philosophy is, and that's why killing the unborn is okay to them, because in their limited materialistic viewpoint, children are a liability, okay? Children are not a blessing. Psalms chapter 127 says, I pulled it up here, I wanted to read it today for you. It says, the Lord has done great things for us, whereof we are glad. Actually, I think I might be in the wrong place here. Yeah, I sure am. But Psalm 127 says that children are a heritage of the Lord, and blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. So, the secularist humanistic mindset of the left doesn't account for that because God is not in the picture and the Christian worldview is not in the picture. And so children are a financial liability. And so since all that matters is my own material advancement, it's okay to get rid of kids. And this is why socialism comes from the same root. It is fruit on the same tree as the abortion movement. And philosophically, once you understand the roots of these things, then you can see how, I don't like the word capitalism. I think it's a pejorative term put on free enterprise by Marxists, okay? A better description or descriptive term for the opposite of socialism is free enterprise. Okay. So free enterprise is a biblical concept, okay, that has deep roots in the Bible, and it actually, can I keep going? I know this is a long answer.
No, this is great. This is fascinating.
You can cut
whatever you want. I actually regret not having a pen right now to write this down. I'll have to rewatch my own podcast. Karl Marx said the private ownership of property is wrong, okay, that all property should be owned by the state. Socialists say, well, we don't necessarily have to own it, but we get to control it. Well, any lawyer who's gone through first-year property class in law school will tell you that ownership is a collection of control rights. That's what it is, okay? It's a bundle of sticks, they say, and each one of these sticks is a different right of control over property. So even though socialists don't hold the title deed to your land, through government, they're going to exercise control over it, or your business, or your car, or your clothing, or anything else they want. And so your bank account, right, through taxation, that's what they do. They tax you, and then they spend the money how they see fit. It's the same thing, okay? And so free enterprise, on the other hand, is built on private property, private ownership of property. And where does that come from? Well, we see it from the very beginning. In Genesis chapter 1, God says to Adam, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. Okay? So there it's implied there. And then his first generation, look at Cain and Abel. What does it say? It says that Abel brought an offering of his flock. Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. Okay, so he's farming, owning land, farming it, bringing that to God.
What good is an offering to God if you don't own it? Can you imagine bringing an offering to God of someone else's money?
That's a pretty easy offering, yeah.
Someone else's money?
Yeah.
Well, this is the socialist mindset, right? I'm going to take from the rich and give to the poor, and boy, aren't I a noble citizen for doing so, right? So private property, and then you see the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, and on it goes. And the parables of Jesus, they're full of private property ownership. The parable of the pounds, parable of the talents, parable of the steward, the unjust steward, and on it goes throughout the Bible. Paul the Apostle said, if a man will not work, neither let him eat. Okay? Private property is built into God's reality. It's built into this world. It's a law of nature that God has established. And the part of the socialist mindset, the reason they reject this is because it built into private property ownership is the idea of individual accountability and consequences for our own choices and our own actions, both for good and for bad. Right? Well, I don't want that. I don't want that accountability. I want someone to take care of me. I'm a victim. Life is tough. Life is hard. I shouldn't have to suffer these things or put up with these things. Right? So even the pro-choicers, now can I be blunt here?
Yes. Yeah.
The woman has the right to choose. Well, yeah, of course she has a right to choose before she has sex. But once she chooses to have sex, the choice has been made.
That is like the most controversial thing I'll say on campus.
Yeah, because don't touch the sex issue.
Yeah. You have a choice. And as long as you're not talking about cases of sexual assault, a woman has engaged in an act where she knows that there are consequences to the act, the woman and the man.
Right.
And there's always consequences to your actions.
Right.
And, sex has interesting consequences attached to it. And that you would think that would be a very simple concept that people would understand. But that is when the audible gasp in the audience, you can hear it, that, oh my gosh, she just told, and then the reaction I get from the people who want to come to gal is, I can have sex as many times as I want, with whomever I want. I'm like, I'm not talking about regulating a law about how many times you can have sex. I'm just saying you have to be open to the consequences of that decision.
Right.
If it's heterosexual sex.
Right.
Maybe you're not even having but it's unbelievable that is something that's, but you're right. It falls right into that mindset of, oh, now I'm a victim. I don't want to have to deal with the consequences of my actions.
Well, another thing on this whole socialism thing, if I could just make this point, I know we're a little limited in time, but so socialists believe that it's compassionate, right? But and it may have a short-term relief of suffering might occur through a socialist policy in an individual case. Maybe now it's short-term. Like healthcare, in a short term, in that individual's case, it may relieve their suffering. But in the broader picture, if you look at, first of all, someone has to pay for that, and where does that money come from? It comes from someone who earned it, all right? Or the government borrows it, and if the government borrows it, it's still coming off the backs of those who earn it, those who generate wealth through work and investment, all right? So in that sense, the compassion you're showing over here is offset by the theft that occurs over here, all right? So it's truly not compassionate in that larger sense. But if you look at what it does to the economy as a whole, it is absolutely not compassionate. So there's a phrase that says a rising tide lifts all boats. Okay, so in a strong economy that is generating large amounts of wealth, everybody benefits. Okay, so even the person who is at the bottom end of the spectrum financially in a free enterprise economy. Now I'm going to qualify what I say here. When I say free enterprise, I'm not talking about an economy that has abuse in it. The purpose of the law is to prevent things like fraud, monopoly, people that or transaction where there's not adequate access to information to make good decisions. Okay, so the law is good when it's used for those things. So a free enterprise economy with equality under the law produces wealth, and everybody benefits, even those at the bottom rung.
And you can see that today in America. Even the poorest of the poor here in America are dramatically better off.
This is right.
Than the poorest of the poor in India.
Right. And that's exactly right. And so in America, we are the wealthiest nation in the world, and it's not because of socialism, okay? with the greatest amount of freedom until probably the last 30, 40 years, okay? And that has been decreasing radically because of socialist policies, with the highest standard of living in the world, okay? Until recently, which is, again, being reminded. But listen to this. America was able to defend freedom around the world in the last 70 years, okay, because of free enterprise. So free enterprise creates the wealth that enables America to be just and to do good in the world. First of all, America has generated more inventions and things that improve people's lives than any other nation. Even though we're 4% of the world's population, America has 42% of the Nobel Prize winners. Is that because Americans are somehow genetically better? No,
the Swedes like us more.
It's because of the conditions here of freedom, equality under the law, rule of law, and so on. In fact, 30% of those Nobel Prize winners in 2015, I think, were immigrants, first-generation immigrants. So you see, has nothing to do with us as Americans. It's the conditions and the environment.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah. So, like, you don't see people breaking down the door to get into Mexico, or to get into China, all right, or Russia, or Cuba, or Venezuela, socialist countries, even Canada, okay, which is going down the tubes pretty fast. So
exporting all their bad policies here.
Right, right. So the wealth that's been generated because of free enterprise has blessed all of us. If we didn't have this, take us back. We would not be who we are, and America would be in poverty just like anybody else. So that's something to really think about. Now, why does socialism...
And that's important because if we're pro-life, and you always hear like people, especially more political progressives, have these very, they don't want to be anti-abortion, but they want to redefine our term of what pro-life is. It's highly annoying. People who are pro-abortion want to tell me what pro-life is. Yeah. But that's really what they're always saying, right? Is we want to take care of the poor, we want to help the vulnerable. But even if you subscribe to that view that pro-life is this all-encompassing term, which it's not and it never should be, and we've had episodes about that, if you subscribe to that term, you should still oppose socialism.
Yeah, absolutely.
And socialist policies.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you look, we were talking earlier about government role and private role. The most effective delivery method for pro-life services are private entities, private organizations. The most effective delivery method for any charitable service is private organizations, not the government, right? So take the numbers for Salvation Army even and compare them to DHS, for example. There's not going to be any comparison at all. And the Bible recognizes that because to be an effective minister of grace and charity to someone, you need to know that person, don't you? You need to have contact with that person. Have a relationship. There needs to be accountability in that relationship, doesn't there? There needs to be structure and this kind of thing. Stuff the government can't provide.
And that's actually real social justice. So I gave a talk a number of years ago at Yale, and I think I took it to some college campuses at the time, but it was real social justice about seeking a relationship, helping someone repair the broken relationships in their life that's led them to the doors of the pregnancy center.
Exactly.
The doors, and that's not easy work. It's not like, sign up for a WIC card, get free health care. That's not going to, at the end of the day, solve her problem, because the root problem that she faces is loneliness, abuse. She's been turned away from her family. That's so good. And so it's like you can give her all the money and material resources you want, but it's still not going to actually take her out of poverty. It's not going to stop the cycle of poverty that she's living in. In fact, she might just find herself back at the abortion facility's doors. At
the root, God is the source of all that healing, right? For someone to break those cycles in their life, they have to change their attitude, their mindset about who they are. They have to know who they are, right? That they are valuable human beings created in the image of God, and that they can trust Him for good, and they can follow His word and His commands in their life, and it will produce good, not harm. This kind of discipleship is the answer. Throwing money at somebody is not the answer, because it doesn't change their behavior. It doesn't change the root cause of their problems, which, as I said earlier, choice. Everybody gets to choose, right? And when it comes to economic prosperity, have you ever seen a lottery winner, right? They may win $100 million. But if they don't have any character or any understanding of money, in a year, 2 years, 5 years, that money is going to be gone. You look at the statistics on lottery winners, you don't see a bunch of millionaires, right? That's because money just doesn't work that way. It's a result of our choices and not really of circumstances.
That's a great point. So as we're wrapping this up, I guess one of the questions that's going to be coming up in the next couple of months, as President Biden's unveiled his new big gigantuan spending plan, and he's going to cure every societal ill. One of the things that President Biden had recommended in his address to Congress was, a national paid family leave plan. And there's conservative ways to do it. There's been, Joni Ernst and Marco Rubio. Republican senators have proposed plans of taking, an advance essentially from your own Social Security fund to, if you want to stay at home for 6 weeks or 8 weeks and your, employer doesn't provide that. There's a more Democrat plan where it's a payroll tax and business owners have to pay more money as well. But so I think there's going to be a debate about that coming up, and Students for Life will be involved in that. But what do you say to? And do you have any, policy prescriptives? So how do we, without subscribing to socialism, saying, well, we have to take from this person and give to that person, how do we get to some of these root problems and address some of these challenges we face in our communities of children who are born to single parents, single mothers, and who, from a very early age are on their own with their moms at work trying to make ends meet, who then have to go into a failing school system where they're not getting education, where, like in Baltimore, it's like the statistics coming out of the Baltimore public schools, they can't read, over 90%. It's unbelievable. And they're getting high school diplomas. And so what do we do? What do we do here as Christians?
Yeah, well, great question. I'm going to tell you the very first solution is that we need to introduce God back into every aspect of our culture and life, because the Bible says that the entrance of thy word, O Lord, giveth light. Okay? So we kick God out of the schools and we make our education completely secular. Children are then taught that they are an accident, right? They evolved from slime and your great-great-great-great-grandparents were monkeys or whatever the case may be. And this whole meaninglessness to life takes over, again, the secularistic, materialistic philosophy, which leads directly into immorality and self-destructive behavior and the destruction of families. It all ties back to God. So the solutions to these problems are not easy, but the solution must begin with God, because that's the only way for us to think right. It's the only way for us to understand. And plus, I have my answer is the church. Okay, I speak to the church. The church has abdicated the role of caring for the poor, of caring for the orphans, of caring for the less fortunate in society and taking care of people, and turned that over to government. The church has abdicated its role in education. And so it's very difficult for Christians now to stand up and point the finger and criticize social welfare programs, because what are we doing? Are we really offering an alternative? So I say that with humility, that what the solution is to get back to God, and yet I say to the church, it's time for us to let the government do its thing, but let's do our thing too. And in due time, if we really stepped up to the plate as the body of Christ in this nation and did our part, why don't take the top 50 cities in America, for example. Let's say the biggest churches in town got together and said, we're going to start a free public education system that's going to be a Christian system. They'd have the best education system anywhere. Parents would be lining up at the door to get into it.
Down the doors to get their kids in.
Absolutely. And don't tell me you can't afford it. You could afford it, okay? You could find the money for that. But here's the thing. It begins with God. It's getting back to a Christian biblical worldview, allocating responsibility where it belongs, letting government fulfill its God-given role, and the church and the family its God-given role. And over time, these problems would begin to heal themselves. But it wouldn't be an overnight fix. It's a long-term solution. But the church needs to begin to stand up and do what the Scripture commands us to do.
That was a perfect ending to that, because I think that was really important, of thinking about how we as Christians, as pro-lifers, what are we called to do,
right,
and to step up and do more. And that's what we do. And I think that's probably one of the most frustrating things we hear as pro-life advocates all the time is, well, what do you do for moms? What do you do for the babies? And people, they don't really want to answer our questions about abortion, so they deflect that answer, and then they want to attack pro-lifers.
right.
And I think, we've talked a lot on this podcast about being very clear about this is what we do, and this is who we are. The fact that we, run more than 2,000 pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes across the country. We are, especially on college campuses, you don't see the Planned Parenthood group lining up to go to the campus health center to troubleshoot solutions, or you don't see the Planned Parenthood group walking alongside a woman who's pregnant and wants to stay in school and go before the administration and say, hey, we need special parking permits, and hey, that was discriminatory, we need this. So I think we just need to be a little bit more bold about saying this is who we are, and then we need to, if we're not doing this work, we need to step it up and challenge our church to do it as well. So thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
This was really great. Like I said, I'm gonna have to go back and listen and watch this again myself and take notes, because I'm gonna have to really think about some of the especially the biblical references you gave us today, which I think was so helpful. So how do people follow what you're doing? I mean, Charis Bible College is beautiful. It's up here in Woodland Park. It's Colorado Springs, up on the mountain. So you teach over there as well as lead Truth and Liberty. So how do folks follow what you are doing, stay in touch with you? Because I think a lot of people will be like, who is Richard and how can I get to know him more?
So they can check out Truth and Liberty on the internet at truthandliberty.net. One word, truthandliberty.net. Charis Bible College is Charis, C-H-A-R-I-S, charisbiblecollege.org or org. Okay, so Charis is we have in there a third-year program that has different areas of concentration for the Bible students. One of them is the practical government school, so that's the part that I'm involved in. And we train believers on the government, God's purpose for government, Christian heritage of America, how to get involved, and this sort of thing. So it's a great program there. So and then my ministry is called upstreamministries.com if they want to check that out. So
that's awesome. Yeah. So you have a lot of ways to follow up with Richard and everything he's doing here in Colorado and across the country. So thanks so much for coming on today. Thanks for letting me host the podcast here in beautiful Colorado. It's fantastic. So it's wonderful background.
Oh, you betcha.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to this special episode. As you know, we are in this special season on pro-life economics. Make sure you subscribe and you tell your friends to tune in, especially for this episode, especially with anyone you know who's an active Christian, Christ follower, who has a little bit of questions about politics and how we apply the rule of government in our lives, and what we should be advocating for to be pro-lifers, to care for women, to care for children, without falling into the trap of advocating for socialist policies. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.